Hi, Professor. So for my qualitative analysis, I wanted to create a PowerPoint and then talk over it. So I hope you enjoy my little presentation. So let's get started. So RTI, what does that mean? RTI stands for response to intervention. Whether a teacher knows it or not, they're using interventions to help literally every single student. So every teacher uses RTI with every student. The extent to that differs obviously from teacher to teacher and from student to student. But in a typical setting where RTI is implemented, there are 3 tiers. So the first tier is the whole class. Teachers are constantly assessing their students and seeing where they fall on the bell curve. And 80% of all students fall under this tier 1 category. And tier 2 is where students are being taught in smaller groups. So these are the at-risk students, and 15% of students fall in this tier 2 category. And then lastly, we have tier 3, which is intensive interventions. And these are the students that really, really are struggling and have like learning disabilities. And only 5% of students are in this tier 3. And that's, we're doing everything we can to like keep them out of the tier 3 and like lift them up to the 2 and 1 tiers. And overall, RTI has a very simple framework and nothing too crazy is going on there. And then so MTSS stands for multi-tier system of supports. This is much more complex than the RTI, and RTI actually falls under MTSS also. Like MTSS you can think of as an umbrella that has RTI underneath it. RTI is also strictly academic, but MTSS can have the behavioral plans as well. So RTI, just academic. MTSS can be academic, but it can also include behavioral issues as well. It's much more comprehensive, like I just explained, and goes beyond academics. MTSS involves a student study team, so SST, which typically involves family. So generally you're going to see the parents of the student, the teachers that are involved with the student, as well as any other administration, such as the principal. And let's go on to IEPs. IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. These are intense and lengthy processes to them. And students are not always involved, although it can be very beneficial for students to be involved, is that they are involved in their IEP meetings and the whole process. They're gonna know it is expected of them on a more lengthy level, as well as they're able to showcase their work, and which will then help them take more pride in the work that they're producing, and hopefully that will translate into them working harder on their things and not it being such a struggle as it is for a lot of students on IEPs. Typically, parents, teachers, and principals are always going to be involved in the IEP process. IEPs are also a last resort. Students on IEPs, like, they cost the district a lot of money, and so districts want to keep their IEP numbers down, which I get it. It makes sense because they do cost more money than a student that is not on an IEP, but at the same time, they need to make sure that their morals are in check, I guess, and making sure that those students are getting what they need is really the most important thing. And then lots of requirements must be followed on IEPs. You can get in a lot of trouble if those minutes are not met with the aides. And I remember in my field work, there was a couple students that clearly didn't need an aide with them all the time, yet the aide was with them, but they couldn't take that aide away until they had their next IEP meeting, which wasn't for like a month or two. But if they stopped giving that assistance to that student, then they could have gotten in a lot of trouble for not doing that. So definitely got to follow all the rules to be okay. And then so moving on to 504s. These are not part of special education, but they are just in place to remove the barriers that are in place for some students. So a super common one is extended time on a test. And 504s are much easier to qualify. A lot of the times, if somebody doesn't qualify for an IEP, they will then go in and apply for a 504 and typically get that. And then, so relating all of this back to my fieldwork school, I did my fieldwork at La Mesa Dale Elementary School. And so I talked with the teacher, and she gave me some blank but documents. And she just walked me through what their process at their specific school site looked like. So I'm just going to share what she shared with me. So for their MTSS, she was using the RTI and the MTSS as synonyms. Like, she didn't separate the two. They were just all together in one. So I'm just going to call it the multi-tier system of support. So she was telling me that they have 5 tiers at their school. So tier 1 is 6 weeks long, and this is where they're developing an intervention plan. And there's 3 SST meetings total in those 6 weeks, and they could be moving up in the tiers during these 6 weeks. So they could start at tier 1, but then at the end of the 6 weeks, they could be at tier 3 or tier 4. And the people that are involved in their school are the gen ed teachers, the special ed teacher, and also the principal in making the intervention plan. And if tier 1 through 4 don't work at the school, then they get SPED testing. And their SPED testing is quite a while. They can be up to 12 to 16 weeks of testing. And during that time, the student is being pulled out of the classroom. They're getting interaction with the reading intervention teacher. And they actually only have a reading intervention teacher. They used to also have a math intervention teacher, but due to budget cuts, they unfortunately had to take that one out. And SPED at this school is definitely a last environment. They try to keep kids in the gen ed classroom as much as they possibly can, which was very nice to see. Inclusion in action. So the IEP at this school, the SPED teacher writes them, and she was telling me if she knows the student personally, then she can write them really, really quickly, like within an hour, which I thought that was really fast because there's a lot that goes into them. And the case manager, so the case manager is the SPED teacher, the school psychiatrist, gen ed teacher, the students, hopefully, principal, and then any other services such as like a nurse or any other services that might pertain to the student are involved in the meetings at their school. She was telling me, though, that a lot of the parents don't want their students to be involved in the IEP process, which was kind of sad just because, I don't know, I've just heard of all of the benefits that it can have. And she said that a lot of the parents there think that it's a negative thing and that it's showing the student what they can't do, which is so sad. So 504s, the school, are not as detailed. They are accommodations in the gen ed classroom, and the only teachers that are involved in the 504 at their school are the gen ed teachers. Like, the SPED teacher has nothing to do with them, and any student can have a 504. They're very, very simple way less complicated than IEPs. And she was telling me that the most common examples of 504 that they see at their school are extended time on tests, they have modified homework, preferential seating, and breaks when they need them. And there are also much less meetings and guidelines that you have to follow for 504s. And then next, I have just some paperwork that she showed me. So this is different guidelines to be looking for at their school for possible needs of intervention. So for example, a first grader who is reading at level A or below, that's going to be an indicator that they possibly need some more support. This one explains the different tiers and what goes into them. On this paper, it only has 3, and she wasn't sure why because she was telling me about the 5 different tiers. Next is the intervention form that gets filled out and just all the different questions that go into it. It's not crazy detailed, but definitely some information in there. And then lastly, we have the SST referral form. Just looking at that, not much that goes into that either, but I like how it says mandatory, like who should attend the meetings. It says child's teacher, parent, student when appropriate, gen ed, teacher, reading specialist, counselor, administration. So all those are going to be there. All right. Thank you for listening. Have a good one.